Hello students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala. In the previous sessions, you would have been given a vivid picture of the various laws available for women and how women are protected against various atrocities. In this module, we will deal with the challenges of women with disabilities and the various support system we have to fight against the odds in their life. Generally, we see in our day-to-day life that people with disability undergo a lot of struggle. Let it be women or men, they had to face very many discriminating situations at home or in their social lives. Although both of them go through discriminations against them, women with disability experience a double burden due to gender and disability. Census of India 2011 reveals that roughly 2% of the Indian population, that is 21 million, is disabled, and in that women constitute 44%. They experience a double burden and so are doubly discriminated. Both in the public and private domains, they are singled out and neglected to access education, employment, and even to found a family. Disabled women are highly invisible and are not included in the developmental process at all, and hence become the most vulnerable ones in the society. By the end of this module, you will be able to understand the challenges they face at the physical, social, and psychological level, and recognize the various rights the women with disability are entitled to. Now, what is disability? Have you ever seen, observed, or talked to a disabled person? How it feels like? Have you ever thought about the reasons for their disability? Anyhow, WHO defines disability as any restriction or lack of ability to perform an activity which is considered normal for the other human beings. It is a state that limits or controls a person's day-to-day functioning. It can hamper the movement, communication, or learning and affect her independent living. It may be an abnormality of any one organ or a combination of multiple organs and their functions. A person may be disabled right from her birth or maybe during her lifetime due to accidents, etc. When we look into the types of disability, it can be divided into various types like sensory disability affecting the sight and hearing, neurological, that is restricted movements and speech, physical disability which affects the hands and legs, the intellectual disabilities affecting the thought process, learning, communication, and problem solving, and affective disability which affects a person's emotions and behavior. To put it into simple terms, disability can occur in seeing, speech, hearing, movement, and mental disability. It may be visible to others like visual impairment or invisible like cerebral palsy and epilepsy. The physical disabilities are more common and visible, and other disabilities are not so. The causes for disability could be pregnancy, birth-related causes, serious illness during motherhood, head injury, or heredity, and sometimes may be a combination of all these causes. Moving on to the disability prevalence, the census data reveals that women outnumber men with reference to disability both in rural and urban areas. It says that there is a steep increase in the percentage of women with disability over the last decade. When we look into various types of disabilities among women, more number of women fall under the categories of visual, hearing, and movement impairments, and quite a few have multiple disabilities also. Therefore, it is important to look into the kind of problems or challenges they undergo in their day-to-day life to meet their ends. Coming to the barriers to development of women with disabilities, first of all, we need to understand what do we mean by barriers in their case. Barriers are those things that hinder or make it difficult to access to services for individuals. In a society where gender discrimination is conveniently accepted, women with disability are the most affected ones with gender inequality and isolation. They suffer immensely at various levels. They are burdened with a lot of social, infrastructural and attitudinal barriers in addition to physical and mental limitations which make their living even worse. Now, let us look into some of the barriers experienced by them. The first and foremost is the attitudinal barrier. Women with disabilities are always looked down by others. They are usually viewed as sick, weak, and helpless dependents. More often, their disability is projected to the front and their abilities are silenced or neglected. It happens in many families that they won't even reveal the disability to outsiders. It is usually thought that since disabled women cannot see, walk, talk, or hear, they cannot think on their own, or they do not have emotions and feelings. They are not seen as normal persons with some abnormality in any one of their functions. They are looked as persons to be helped and dependent always on others at all times. Because of this attitude, disabled women are not allowed to move out of their homes, get access to resources, and involve themselves in various activities based on their abilities. Many times they are not allowed to decide for themselves, and so most of their life decisions are taken by others. In India, disability is believed to be a consequence of a sin committed earlier. It is not seen as the failure of the social system, and therefore disabled women are always pitted against or hidden entirely. In the developed countries, proper and adequate systems are available to examine, support, and develop women with disability, and so they can exercise their rights. Unfortunately, in India, mostly the parents or the caregivers decide the course of life of these women. Their emotions, feelings, desires, and abilities are not recognized by others. This negative attitude results in formation of a very low self-esteem which hinders their development. Moving to social barriers, generally in all the societies, women face gender-based discrimination in all the walks of their lives. Disabled women are doubly disadvantaged and discriminated due to their gender and disability. Being a woman and having disability jeopardizes their situation, and they are more vulnerable to the unfairness shown by the society. Right from the birth, they are treated badly and are denied justice. It is a known fact that children with congenital disabilities are not cared for and sometimes left to die. This is far more true to happen in the case of a girl. When their survival itself is questioned, one cannot deny other discriminations they may have to face in life. If allowed to survive, they may continue to face bias within the family, receive less care and food, and left out in the family interactions. She may not be exposed to the fruits of education and employment. She will have lesser access to rehabilitation services and no hope for marriage. Poverty adds additional burden to their disability. They are being forced to be marginalized and isolated. They live as the poorest of the poor with nothing left to look forward to. When we look into the infrastructural or the so-called physical barriers, the disabled women encounter a lot of problems due to unmindfully built up physical structures which were designed for the normal ones. Do you see pavements, ramps, elevators, and special signboards meant for them everywhere? No, we don't see them and feel their negligence either. Therefore, the accessibility to public places and buildings becomes a nightmare for them. To start with, can you think of any educational institutions like schools, colleges, and universities, or offices of public and private employments, factories, industries, and other similar organizations with such facilities? Very rarely, yes. That is why women with disabilities have less access to health care when compared with their male counterparts. Not to think too far, to carry out their daily routine, walking on the roads and enjoy other recreational activities is still harder for them. None of these structures have facilities like ramps or elevators for easy movement of disabled, especially for the ones with locomotor and visual disabilities. The combination of lack of adequate mobility aids and inaccessibility makes them remain uneducated and unemployed. When women in urban centers itself face these many difficulties, nothing can explain the plight of rural disabled women. The rough, unpaved mud roads, lack of schools in the nearby vicinity, lack of other infrastructural facilities like library, toilets, proper classrooms, and the distance to be travelled discourage them from having dreams of education and development. Lack of health care leads to early premature death, continued sufferings due to ill health, and inadequate personal assistance and negligence add up to their distress. When we look at the organizational barriers, it includes the entire gamut of lack of social and welfare policies, rules and regulations, priorities and facilities, lack of adequate assistive technologies, non-availability of forums and groups to voice their opinion, lack of access to information, meager allocation of time and resources, and low status and relationships enjoyed by them in a society. All these systems have to coordinate with one another for an effective mainstreaming and rehabilitation of women with disabilities. When women in total, and especially women with disabilities, enjoy a very low status in a society and their needs are not given top priority, one cannot think of the other systems to fall in place. With very less access to assistive technologies and very less support groups to voice their conditions, it is difficult for disabled women to cut across the barriers and achieve their best. With these many barriers all around them, disabled women face a lot of challenges in their lives. Let us see them one by one now. Any functional impairment is not always converted to disability. It is only when the disabled are not given enough opportunities to utilize their potential, these barriers change the impairment into disability. Gender acts as a catalyst to this change. Many of the official records and data are gender blind, and therefore disabled women are yet to receive the due attention towards their rights. Some of the challenges experienced by the disabled women are: first and foremost is the survival. Disabled women face discrimination right from their birth. When the life of the normal female infant is ended by feticide and infanticide, the plight of the disabled girl child is worse. With the help of highly sophisticated reproductive technologies, the imperfect fetus is eliminated, denying their right to survival. Though some of them succeed in that, they continue to suffer throughout their life for their survival needs. Secondly, poverty. Disabled girl children in the poor families are the depressed in the society. Due attention and care are not given to them. Most of the time, their needs are neglected and therefore they do not show the required physical and mental growth. Poor disabled girls struggle for everything throughout their life, for example, from ill health, malnutrition, and low level of quality of life. Access to literacy and education is the major challenge for them even now. Compared to men with disabilities, these women are less educated. Only a very few end up in higher education. Gender plays a significant negative role in identifying the educational needs of the disabled girls, and so very less number of girls is only admitted in special schools. Moreover, when there is generally a skewed teacher-student ratio, how can a girl with a physical or intellectual disability will get access to adequate attention? Again, higher education is a great challenge for them as they face problems like accessibility and accommodation. Gender and disability stereotyping hinders them to aim for higher aspirations and employment in different fields. Yet another major challenge is vocational training. It is an area where the normal person herself finds it difficult to get entry into. the need for vocational education to women and girls is not yet understood clearly. Also, there is a patriarchal thinking that only men are fit for technical skill orientation and women and girls should confine themselves to the domestic chores. The organizational and physical barriers also influence this kind of a thought, where women with disability find it difficult to reach the industrial centers and other vocational centers, which are usually situated in the urban areas, in which the rural women find it difficult to access. It is very important to note here that how many women who are vocationally trained are placed in employment. The placement services are very poor for disabled women. The next challenge is access to employment and paid work. In a society where able-bodied women are denied to education, productive work and health care, it is considered as a waste of resource to help of these women with disability. The market forces have totally denied them opportunity, as if they do not have any role to play in the economy. Therefore, they are placed in significantly lowest cadres, where they are denied of full-time employment and equal wages. Though under the reservation policy, 3% of the public sector employments are reserved for disabled people. Under the reservation policy, 3% of public sector employments are reserved for disabled people. There are two questions here. First, given the increase in the number of disabled women both in urban and rural areas, will this 3% reservation are enough to cater to the employment needs of disabled? Second, should we not push it further, that is to increase the percentage of reservation for disabled in public employments? Even in that 3%, it does not specifically mention as to what percentage is allotted for women with disability. It is a general quota where obviously women will not be preferred. Sexuality and reproduction is another major challenge which these women find it very difficult to face even today. Women with disabilities are usually considered as asexual. The traditional roles of women like lover, mother, nurturer and a homemaker are seen as inappropriate for them. They face a lot of limitations in playing the traditional roles. Marriage seems to be a mirage for these women. Either they don't marry or marry later, or when they married, be divorced and always lead a life of being alone. This situation sometimes may force them into exploitative or abusive relationships because of their limited social and economic sources. Disabled mothers are always looked down by the society, as they are considered unfit to bear the pregnancy, and their skills in bringing up their children are always questioned. They encounter a lot of problems in motherhood because of the irrational stigma attached to their disability. Even the literacy and feminist writings have not thought of it, and so by and large they remain invisible. Health is another major area which remains neglected. The general health status of both physically and mentally disabled women is highly deplorable, especially those with locomotive and mental disorders. Most of the time, their health needs are unattended to. This aggravates their poor health conditions, leading to added disability. If their health needs are addressed at the right point of time, they may even perform better. Women with disabilities undergo depression and other psychological conditions which will affect their normal functioning. Malnutrition is a very important one where disabled women are highly neglected. The conception of required nutritional intake is a big challenge for disabled women even today. It has been proved by various studies that there is gender discrimination in nutritional intake and the quality of food given to girls or women in a family. When fueled by disability, women are less cared for and their nutritional supplements are not given importance. Most of the times they are undernourished, as they are not considered as productive members of the family. Undernutrition leads to a lot of other complications related to their disability and their physical and mental health in general. Violence, the major challenge in front of the disabled women. It is a clear contradiction that Though disabled women are considered as asexual, they are the ones at higher risk of being sexually abused. As girls and women with disability are more vulnerable, they remain unprotected against any assault on their honor like sexual harassment, rape, or forced prostitution. This vulnerability increases for those who are marginalized and dependent. Women who live under poor economic conditions often have to undergo these atrocities because of their disability. Now, having seen the challenges and barriers of women with disabilities to develop themselves, let us now move on to the rights they have and the efforts taken by the international community to address their issues. Do women with disability have any fundamental and basic rights? It is well established that they undergo double discrimination. They are differentiated from others in terms of lack of equal access to education, healthcare, reduced opportunities in employment, and therefore to social inclusion. Because of their reduced status in the social space, they face violence and unfairness. They have to tolerate all forms of atrocities against their body and brain. This was well understood and recognized by the United Nations, which intends to protect the rights and dignity of women, especially disabled women. The first international human rights treaty, called Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2006 and came into force in 2008. It ensures to protect and promote disabled women, and the member countries are obligated to ensure full enjoyment of human rights by them. What is the role of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities? The core provisions of the so-called CRPD include all the universal rights like social, political, economic, and cultural rights and fundamental freedoms declared for everyone. Apart from that, the specific rights for disabled are the right to accessibility, mobility, independent living, participation, and cultural life. It is the responsibility of the member countries to ensure the rights to access to roads, buildings, public places, information, the right to rehabilitation, the right to participate in political, social, and cultural life, and the right to recreation and sports leading to social inclusion. The UN Convention, the so-called Disability Convention, stresses raising the awareness of the general community on the rights of disabled women to fight back the stereotypes and bias based on gender and disability. These campaigns should address the issues of inclusiveness and positive promotion of their ability and skills in the labor market and the workplace. It emphasizes the need for physical, service, and information accessibility. Disability-friendly technology can play a greater role in this. The CRPD affirms equality before law. The states should in turn assert equal treatment of women with disability, and appropriate measures should be taken to ensure organizational support to women to exercise their rights. They should be assured the right to inclusive education, and the state should take measures to impart special education for various categories of disabled women, like for visually challenged braille learning, for hearing impaired sign language, and employ special education teachers and other professionals to impart through alternative educational materials and technologies. The habilitation and rehabilitation rights of disabled, as ensured by the Convention, can be affirmed by the states through provision of maximum independence and participation in social and cultural life. Enough opportunities must be given to them in the fields of education, employment, health, and social services, and the state should promote multidisciplinary assistive technologies to support their skills. Regarding work and employment rights, women with disabilities should be given opportunities in suitable employments, the right to equal pay, just and humane working conditions, and the self-employment and entrepreneurship prospects. Coming back to our Indian scenario, what is the role of our government to protect them? Gender equality and justice is protected in our constitution in the form of fundamental rights and directive principles. It prohibits all forms of discrimination against women and encourages enacting legislations favoring them. Apart from that, our constitution promotes and encourages the states to have certain affirmative and supportive plans and programs, especially for women and their development. In India, the human rights and the fundamental rights applicable to all the citizens are equally applicable to disabled people also. This includes equality rights, equal opportunity in employment, and the right to decent life, etc. Currently, 4 legislations are operational for persons with disabilities. They include the Mental Health Act, the Persons with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Council of India Act, and the National Trust Act. Since all these legislations are based on different approaches and their services are extended accordingly, there is a lack of holistic approach towards the rights of the disabled. Though all these legislations affirm to protect the interest of the disabled and aim at their social, political, and cultural empowerment, they tend to follow a welfare approach. Though these legislations guarantee participation, equality, treatment, and care of mentally ill and rehabilitation for disabled, the rights-based approach, which is envisioned by the UN Convention, is silently neglected in them. India became a signatory to the UN Convention only in the year 2007. Therefore, India needs to conform to the Disability Convention, and henceforth a revision of all these legislations conforming to the convention becomes necessary. But in reality, very few efforts are only taken to bring changes or amendments in the legislations to suit to the current needs of the disabled people. The convention recognizes the hardships that women with disability undergo, the ill treatment against them, and highlights the need to incorporate a gender perspective towards empowering them by satisfaction of fundamental rights and human rights which they are entitled to. But the Persons with Disability Act is silent on the discrimination and violence against women with disabilities. The 4 main provisions appropriate to disabled women under the convention are: number 1, principle of equality; number 2, recognition of the multiple discrimination faced by women with disability and the responsibility of the state to enhance their quality of life; and number 3, protection from all forms of exploitation; and number 4, ensuring access to social protection. Here also, the Persons with Disability Act fails to compel the state government to enforce a gender perspective approach in eliminating all forms of discrimination and ensure access to resources. The Mental Health Act briefs about the treatment of mentally ill in an institutionalized setting. It fails to approach mental illness as a public health issue. The role of family and community and the importance of community-based rehabilitation have been totally neglected. Unnecessary detentions, physical and sexual harassment of women with mental illness is often quoted as the negative impact of such institutionalized treatments. Therefore, we need to understand that though the international instruments and conventions are there to protect the rights of disabled women, when it comes to practice and applications, India has a long way to go. We most of the time miss out the facts due to our inbuilt gender stereotypes. Lots of revisions or amendments are needed in our legislations to safeguard the interests of them. In this scenario, what can we do to empower them? It is not enough that rights of the disabled girls and women are guaranteed through conventions and legislations. It has to be taken forward to ensure that these women are treated with dignity and enjoy their full rights. Some of the tools for this empowerment could be inclusive education. Not withholding the limitations of inclusive education, wherever necessary and possible, these girls are to be inducted into mainstream education. Opportunities are to be provided to them to understand their strengths and skills. Only through inclusive education, these girls and women can be inducted into the society, and the society in turn can be made to understand the challenges of these people. The other tool could be sensitizing the community. Though it is the role of the government to make rules and laws, it has to direct everyone to follow them. It should become a part of the functions of the legislatures, the administrators, and everyone in the society to get sensitized about the problems of the disabled and their rights. Sensitizing the family is the big challenge faced by the forums which are fighting for their rights. Apart from that, we need to sensitize the general public that women have potentials to reach up to their goals. Moreover, we need to create awareness among disabled themselves. Many times the disabled, especially the disabled women themselves, are not aware of the rights and the various other facilities and welfare measures available for them. This restricts their usage of assistive technologies, enjoyment of rights, and the employment opportunities. Therefore, it is very important to increase their level of awareness on various issues concerning them, which will in turn increase their self-confidence to exercise their rights. To summarize, this module is designed to give an overview of the challenges faced by women with disability and the rights those women are entitled to. Women with disability are neglected from time immemorial, and there are always a negative picture created about them. Though their needs and rights are the same and similar to others, they are totally ignored and left to pitiable conditions. The society always downsizes their capacities and capabilities, and therefore not enough opportunities are given to them for their full realization. Their education and employment rights are not recognized by the government, and so little has been done to empower them or enjoy their fundamental and human rights. All the international forums and conventions lay emphasis on empowering women with disabilities and stress on equality and an inclusive gender perspective. But they are yet to become a reality. Women with disability continue to suffer right from birth to get education, to get trained in skills, to get a gainful employment, to found a family, to access public places and get a fair and proper treatment. Suitable constitutional and legal amendments are necessary to support these women and encourage their fullest participation in social and public life.